Pond Stung album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest 10th album from Australian psychedelic rock and neo-psych project Pond. They've been at it since the mid-2000s, and over the years they've worked with a lot of sounds that are very near and dear to my heart. And that's why it's always frustrated me that I've never been able to fully get into the band and where they've been and the albums that they've put out. I mean, a lot of the sounds they work with are sounds that I love, but there's always been a disconnect from me, and that's been since day one. Their early releases like Psychedelic Mango and Frond and Beard Wives and Denim. I mean, progressively each album sounded a little bit better production-wise, but like when these albums were at their low points, they seemed halfway between King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and Led Zeppelin and really confused. And I'm sorry, but Hobo Rocket is just an absolute mess of a psychedelic rock record. Now, in the later years, I have eased up on the band a little bit. I have enjoyed some more of their music, like Man, It Feels Like Space Again. I mean, yeah, some of the later tracks on here were a little iffy, but the first half of this record is awesome. It has some of the best material that the band's ever put out. But then instantly, that was yanked out from under me a few years later with The Weather, which people were hyping the hell out of and ended up on many end-of-the-year lists for so many people. And I just don't get it. I mean, people were treating this album like it was the next big thing in psych, but to me, this seemed like old hat. This seemed like something that King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard or freaking Tame Impala would have done 8 years earlier, but so much better. And speaking of Tame Impala, by the way, Kevin Parker has engineered all of the records that I've chatted about so far, and is a former member of Pond. Tasmania, which was the first time I reviewed an album from Pond on this channel, still getting negative comments on that to this day, by the way. Honestly, I did enjoy most of the album. A lot of the synthy stuff in the later moments was pretty cool. But still, I was just not excited about this album. This album didn't scream something wildly new to me. Now, I will say this. Their last album, 9, I thought this was really cool. It was a lot synthier, there were a lot more jams on this record, there was a much more glossier production style, and honestly, I felt a lot of it was really infectious. As a matter of fact, it's grown on me ever since. Now, leading up to this thing, I've got to tell you, I wasn't overly excited, but I was curious to see where the band's at, as I always am, and I thought some of the singles were pretty cool, but let me tell you, it's another one of those Pond records. Now that I have that out of the way, I will say this. Like usual, the highs are actually pretty high, like I'm Stung, for example. One of the lead singles from this album, I think it's a blast. It's got a glitzy riff and some funk thrown in for good measure, and honestly, it sounds really good. Add that into this very dreamy and hazy aesthetic that the band usually works with, and it's a really unique single. It's flashy, it's got a little groove to it, but it also has some really passionate performances. Yeah, I loved it as a single, and it's only grown on me ever since. I also really love Neon River, also was a single, and I hear tracks like this, and for a few short minutes, I get it. I mean, I was a little weary about hearing this very stripped down, soft riff to start this track off the first couple of times I heard it, but it really does explode. The subdued verses and this big cataclysmic chorus, all wrapped up in this very dreamy aesthetic. It's a really interesting sound that's well thought out. The big sound, and when they're on, they do it really well. And I will say this album might not be necessarily for me overall, but the production on most of this record is pretty stunning. I really do love Black Lung as well, mostly because the pacing here is immaculate. They really do give this track room to breathe. Here, they are still definitely working with that neo-psych aesthetic. You're going to hear that for most of the record, but there's also some drama here. And because of that, when we get funky breakdowns later on in the track, they come off much more electric. I love hearing the band freak out like this. I love the sort of duality that we get here. This is interesting. Not only that, but some of the grooves in the final minute are super impressive. God, the highs are just so high, which brings me to Edge of the World Part 3, which is over 8 minutes long. Yeah, that terrified me leading up to this track, but let me tell you, not only is it the best track here, it's one of the most impressive cuts from Pond I've heard in some time. Like this, to me, this is the standard. This is where they should be. This is a genuinely progressive, captivating, adventurous neo-psych track that does not let up. I love the synth sections as well. It gives me almost like a Mike Oldfield vibe to it. The jazzy saxes, the sweet woodwinds, everything about this track is so well thought out. And if you're looking for a really out of the box and genuinely experimental track, look no further. I'm trying though. I'm really trying. Like, I go into every album review with a clean slate for the band, and I just roll with it, and I'm trying, but this album is so inconsistent. Constant Picnic, which starts this album off, really did not start things off on a good foot with me. The dreamy aesthetic is fine. It's actually really pretty and charming, but the rest of this track doesn't really sound like it knows what it wants to do. This shifty instrumental doesn't come off as psychedelic or weird or experimental or anything new. It comes off as just clumsy, confused, half-baked even. It's not where I wanted to start. Did I mention this album is an hour? I hear tracks like So Low, which were also singles. And God, this track was a miss for me. Sure, the glossy, funky psych riff is pretty fun in the moment. It's got some energy to it. But that's kind of where this track ends. Lyrically, this is such a phoned-in performance that I'm genuinely shocked. Like, how is there this much of a downfall? And how is it that all of a sudden Pond just sound like they're trying way too hard? Sunrise for the Lonely. I think this is by far the worst track here. I mean, I got worried when I heard that lonely-ass drum machine kick this track off. And those worries completely are proved correct here. I mean, just imagine the least interesting neo-psych instrumental you've heard all year. And then some vocals that sound like they were recorded for another track whatsoever, and the two are trying to keep up. And it's sloppy. It's genuinely one of the most annoying tracks I've heard all year. Elf Bar Blues is also really annoying. I mean, the cosmic, very spacey synths of this track did excite me from a mile away, but this track doesn't progress at all, and by the end, even those are annoying me. It's another one of those Pond records for me. The highs are so incredibly high, but every time I hear a track that I genuinely love, the next track, more often than not, is one that puts me to sleep. We have Stars and Silken Sheets. I mean, I really did need to be taken down a peg after Edge of the World Part 3. I mean, this is just 30 seconds that I'm not getting back. That's all it is. Boys Don't Crash, this was a really pleasant surprise for me. I mean, there's some actual energy and passion on this track. If you're looking for a really memorable riff, look no further. It's got some bite to it, but it's also got a more poppy appeal to it with just how airy and full of life it is. It's a great blend of styles. It's very Pond, and I'd love to hear more of this. But then I hear OUV Ray, and let me tell you, this track is not for me. I mean, not for nothing. I give credit where it's due. The production on this track is awesome, and the strings are really heavenly. But this phoned-in vocal and lyrical performance does not have a leg to stand on. Lyrically, we could just do so much better. And yeah, in the final moments of this track, we get some truly stunning instrumentals. But let me tell you, this track should have just stayed an instrumental. Last Elvis, I mean, maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome, or maybe I just needed a little bit more energy, but I actually think this track's pretty great. Yeah, the riff's really memorable. This track's super bouncy and loose, and it just sounds like the band's having some fun again. It's amazing what a little energy can do. Elephant Gun is fine. I mean, the production throughout most of this album has been really cool, and this track is no different. The synths do sound great. But why is there just such a disconnect on tracks like this? As far as the big picture goes, I'm sorry, but these tracks don't come together for me. And let me tell you, this is a long album, and some of these tracks didn't need to be here. But because I can't be even more frustrated, Fell from Grace with the Sea as a finale is absolutely incredible. This is a passionate, piano-driven tune that has the same sense of adventure and genuine experimentation as Edge of the World Part 3. I mean, as this track moves forward, it is nothing short of wowing and epic and a real testament for what the band can do. Why are these albums so inconsistent? And you know what? This is probably going to be another review of mine that gets a lot of, flack and stuff. Just because I don't get it. I'm not into it. I'm not feeling this album. A lot of these tracks are really great, but for every great track here, there's one that's putting me to sleep. I'm sorry, but I'm just feeling like a light 5 on this thing. I wish Pond would really come out with something much more concise and consistent, but that's just me. Let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.